Diane. We appreciate that. If you have not received a bulletin, Todd's still available in the back. Obviously, at the front are our announcements for the week, and then on the back is a place to take some notes, just to track of our conversation. So we're going to get started this morning with a small test for you all, because you've been out of school, at least some of you all, for a couple months, some of you all for a couple decades. And so what I want to test your attention. And so what we're going to see here is there's a very small clip of some individuals passing a ball. There's some wearing black shirts, some wearing white shirts. And so you're going to see the video kind of prompts you to count how many passes that these individuals make. And so pay attention very closely, and I'm going to kind of test you at the end to see how well you paid attention, because it does move pretty quickly. All right, hopefully this video will work. If not, we have a plan B. All right, there we go. All right, how many passes did you all count? You guys can talk here. How many did you guys get? How many? 15? You said 15? All right, you get a high five later. All right, 15 passes, right? 15 passes were made there in that video, right? I watched it multiple times, and it took me a while to count 15 passes. All right, did you guys notice anything else about that video? Anything else? The gorilla? Gail saw a gorilla. Did anybody else see a gorilla? All right, I'm messing with you, but the reality was there was a gorilla in that video. Did you guys see the gorilla walk through the scene? Anybody? All right, let's play this video again. I want to show it to you. I'm going to back it up. All right, isn't that crazy? I watched that, and they said, did you see the gorilla? I'm like, what are they talking about? Okay, so if you did not see it, you are in good company, right? Most folks do not see it. Those that did, I'm actually pretty impressed. You guys have seen that test before. Okay, so he was prepped. You guys knew that. Okay. So it is a test that was put together by some psychologists that pretty much was a way for us to process how we focus our attention. Like I said, most folks that saw that video did not see the gorilla, which it's crazy, right? Because he walks right in the middle of the scene, right? We are so focused on counting those passes, we miss everything else going on in that small scene. Right? Some folks, again, I've read through this. This test was done a couple decades ago. They were told there's a gorilla walking through that, and they insist there is no gorilla. Right? That is just crazy. But clearly, a gorilla walked through the middle of that scene. Now, I want to show you that video to illustrate a key point. That is that our attention is limited and highly selective. You see, we can focus so deeply on one task, one part of our life, that we miss out on other important parts. Right? We suffer from blindness in other parts of our life. Right? You are so focused on counting those passes, you are blind to the guy in the gorilla costume walking through. In fact, the psychologists, as they were kind of working through this phenomena, they dubbed it unintentional blindness, right? Not unintentional, but unintentional blindness. And it deals with another theory of psychology known as perpetual load theory, right? I kind of went down a rabbit hole reading about this. This is crazy. And the idea is the harder the task is in front of you, the more blind you are to what's going on around you. So it did take quite a bit of effort for you all to count those 15 passes, right? I counted it multiple times. Even when I know there's 15, sometimes I miss one, right? You're so focused on the task in front of you, you miss what's going on around you. And I want to talk about this because it illustrates a greater point in our lives, right? We all suffer from unintentional blindness, right? Not unintentional, unintentional blindness. We get so busy with our lives, so focused on what needs to be done, keeping our homes running, our businesses going, keeping life moving, that we fail to notice often the people around us that God has called us to lead. And this takes place in all of our homes. It takes place in my home, right? You know how it is, right? It's a lot of work, right? To work all week, right? To make sure your grass is cut, there's food on the table, dishes are clean, clothes are clean, your kids are alive. You get so busy trying to run your home that you miss the people in your home, right? You're so focused on counting the passes, you miss the gorilla. I'm not making any direct correlations there about the gorilla in your home. Right, you get so focused on building a business, keeping the farm running, that you neglect the employees and people God has put around you to make that endeavor possible. You can get so focused on pursuing a hobby that you are not present in other areas of your life. We can become so preoccupied trying to accomplish this goal that God has put in front of us that we neglect to lead ourselves well, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I hope you kind of see the correlation from weeks past as we were talking through the book of Nehemiah about these things that God puts in our heart, these goals that God puts in front of us. If we're not careful, we get so focused on these goals, these good things, that we can miss what's going on around us as well. And so what I want to focus this morning, what I want to focus on is even though we might be focused on the what and the where and the how, right, that goal, that endeavor God has put right in front of us, what often happens if we're not careful is we miss the who, right? We miss the people around us that God has placed in our lives to lead. We can miss the great for the good. And so what I want us to talk about this morning is what qualities do we find in intentional and attentive and focused leaders, right? All of us have been given people to lead, whether it be people within the context of this church and this community, our families. All of us lead somebody, and all of us struggle with this area of attention. And so what we're going to do is, if you have your Bible, turn to Nehemiah chapter 5. And we're going to be continuing our series that we started several weeks ago in this book. I entitled the series, Under Construction. And so the book of Nehemiah, it's authored by the man Nehemiah, and it focused upon the people of Israel. If you remember their history, the nation of Israel split in two. They had a civil war of sorts. And over the course of about 150 years, both of these kingdoms are conquered by greater empires and hauled off away from the land. They were exiled is the word that we use. And so now here we have, a couple hundred years later, Nehemiah is removed from the land, and he has a heart and a love, though, for the land. In fact, there's a number of Hebrew people who were never hauled off. There's a group of people who have made their way back to the land. And so there's hopes within the nation of Israel that their land will be rebuilt, primarily their capital city, Jerusalem. So there's an expectation that these people that have gone back to the land have rebuilt the walls, they've rebuilt the temple, and they're beginning to thrive. And Nehemiah, he works for the king of the Persian Empire. And he gets news that this is not what has happened. And God lays this burden on his heart to see the walls of the city rebuilt. God gives him a burden to see them rebuilt, and he gives him an opportunity to see this vision realized. He gets the blessing from the king to go back to Jerusalem and to rebuild these walls. But as with any construction project, as many of you well know, it's never straightforward. Nehemiah not only has to gather the material and the supplies, but he has to gather and lead people to make this project become a reality. And that is where he experiences tension. He's got this goal, this focus in mind of rebuilding these walls. But he's dealing with this attentive issue. He's so focused on building the walls, he's beginning to miss the people around him. So that's just a little bit of context of where we are. We all struggle with this, giving attention to some important things around us, primarily people. What qualities are found in an attentive and focused leader? Now, yesterday, we just celebrated 250 years as a country, right? And our country would not have survived without great leaders like Abraham Lincoln, right? Our 16th president. And if you know anything about Lincoln's presidency, he came into this role in a period of great division in the context of our country. In fact, he was elected, and very soon after, states began to leave the Union. Right? We are divided as a country, literally taking up arms and fighting and killing each other, neighbor after neighbor. But Abraham Lincoln was an incredibly wise man. After the 1860 United States presidential election, Abraham Lincoln appointed several of his strongest political opponents to his cabinet, including William Seward, Salmon Chase, and Edward Bates. Each had believed they were more qualified to be president than Lincoln. Rather than surrounding himself with people who agreed with him, Lincoln deliberately chose intelligent, independent thinkers who challenged his ideas. He encouraged disagreement during cabinet meetings, listened carefully, and often challenged or refined his decisions after hearing opposing viewpoints. During the American Civil War, this approach helped produce better military, political, and diplomatic decisions. Lincoln's confidence came not from believing he was the smartest person in the room, but from ensuring the smartest ideas emerged, regardless of who proposed them. Again, we understand Abraham Lincoln as being a great leader, leading our country through a very difficult time. But part of his support he had came from people who saw the world differently than him. Right? It's wild, right? He invited members into his cabinet that were running against him for president just several months earlier. Many of them thought they should have been president. Here's a fundamental point I want you to understand that our 16th president understood. Leadership begins when we stop seeing ourselves as the smartest person in the room. In fact, I see this breakdown of leaders all the time. I think it's kind of very interesting. I see this often in pastoral circles because those are the circles that I kind of walk in. Pastors will hire different people, music ministers, youth pastors, children pastors, and they hire these people, but then they tell them what to do. Right? If you're the smartest person in the room, then it's really dumb to listen to other people. When we act that way, when we act like the smartest person in the room, we inadvertently develop blind spots and deafness. We communicate to people, whether it be directly or indirectly, things such as, I've been around longer than you. I'm older than you. You can't teach me anything. We say things, whether it be literally or metaphorically to people, I don't need to listen to you because I already know what's needed. You're just here to accomplish my vision. I'm in charge, so I'm right. Right? When we see ourselves as the smartest person in the room, we encounter a problem when it comes to leading people. So as we look at the book of Nehemiah, we'll be there in a moment. When we're talking about qualities found in attentive and focused leaders, the first thing that we need to realize is that listening must be prioritized. Stop seeing yourself as the smartest person in the room because you're not. Right? There's a lot of other incredibly smart people that see the world differently than you. And leaders are called to listen. We see Nehemiah exercising this principle with the people of Israel. Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 1 through 2, ultimately 3 there. Now there arose a great outcry of the people and of their wives against their Jewish brothers. For there were those who said, with our sons and our daughters we are many, so let us get grain that we may eat and keep alive. So here we come onto the scene where Nehemiah is dealing with this uproar, this tension of the people who are building this wall. And they are crying out, not against the Persian people, not against these oppressing empires, but their own Jewish brothers. And they have many, many kids, just like I do, and they're like, we eat a lot of food. We need to get something to eat, right? We're dealing with the literal problem here in our family. We're going hungry. Now, there's a lot of reasons why this would have occurred. Likely, right, the husband or maybe the wife, they're both there working toward this effort on building the wall, and so they're busy building the wall rather than, farming, gaining an income to feed their families. And so there's some real hardship experienced by the Hebrew people, and they're crying out to Nehemiah saying, hey, we are hurting, help us. Verse 3, there were also those who said, we are mortgaging our fields and our vineyards and our houses to get grain because of the famine. So real deep hardship is occurring among the Hebrew people. They have, as you see in the text, they mortgaged out their fields just to buy groceries for the week. Right? As you know, this is not a long-term survival plan for anything. So they're already pressed to the limits as they're stretched trying to work on this building project, probably already living, right, literally day to day trying to make ends meet. And now they're mortgaging out their fields to get food, and they're dealing with a famine. Right? So very, very deep hardship that they are experiencing, and they're crying out to Nehemiah, help us. Verse 4, and there were those who said, we have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields and our vineyards. Right? These guys are mortgaged out like crazy. They've taken on serious debt, not only to get food, but to pay their taxes. And they're upset, right? They got mouths to feed. Verse 4, now our flesh is as the flesh of our brothers. Our children are as their children. Yet we are forcing our sons and daughters to be slaves. And some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but it is not in our power to help it. For other men have our fields and our vineyards. In verse 1, you see that they're crying out, again, not against other leaders in the Persian governments. They're not crying out against other empires. They're crying out against their own fellow countrymen. You see, there were individuals within the Hebrew people that were a little better off. They were the ones offering these loans out to the people who needed help. And they were the ones inflicting this pain on them. You see, they even see in verse 5, they literally are selling their kids out to slavery to make ends meet. And they're crying out to Nehemiah, help us. And Nehemiah listens to their cries, these real complaints. We see that in verse 6 here in a moment. And we know he listens to their cries and their complaints because he's the one who authored this book and he records them. He's aware of these needs that they have. And again, these complaints are directed primarily toward their fellow countrymen. Nehemiah hears the people, and we'll see he responds. See, as a leader, you have been given a position of responsibility and even authority, where you don't necessarily have to listen to those that you lead, right? Parents, you don't have to listen to your kids, right? Employer, you don't have to listen to your employees. But you, if you believe that God sovereignly placed you in that position of leadership, have been entrusted to lead those people. And maybe you aren't listening to them. You're so busy counting passes, trying to keep your home running, that you have tuned out the gorilla right in the middle of your home. And so what we see here Nehemiah has to do is he has to humble himself. Even though he is the governor of all of Judah, as we'll see, he has been given a position of authority. He doesn't have to listen to the Hebrew people. He could just demand that they do this project. He humbles himself and he listens to them. He acknowledges that he might not be the smartest person in the room. He creates space for these people to speak up. Do you create space for people in your life to speak up? Are you approachable? Or have people stopped approaching you because they know you don't listen? Or they know that you're going to make them feel dumb or stupid? Are you teachable? Have you ever taken a moment to pause and realize that maybe choices that you made in leadership in the past were not the best? Are you approachable? Are you teachable? Do you listen to the people that God has called you to lead? Nehemiah was called to lead the nation of Israel in this great project, and here he is recording the words of the cries of the people, the needs that they have. He's listening to them. Who has God called you to lead? Are you listening to your spouse when they ask you to be home a little bit more, to be more present? Are you listening to your kids and the needs that they have? Are you attuned to where they're at right now in the stage of life and the needs that they have? Employers, right? Are you aware of the needs of your employees? God has called us all to lead somebody, and every single one of us are struggling in some part of this leadership responsibility. So listening has got to be prioritized. There's a story about a politician who was going town to town, trying to get votes, trying to hear the people, and so he hosts a small town hall. And he gathers in front of a group of people, and he tells them, what do the people want? So one person in the back hollers, like we all would holler, lower taxes. Soon after, someone hollers, we want better roads. Someone up front hollers, we want affordable health care, right? All things that we demand out of our politicians. And so the leader, he's nodding, he's hearing these cries and these needs, and so he whispers to his aide sitting right next to him, and he says, all of these people seem very passionate about shouting. Let's schedule some more shouting sessions, right? Not about yelling, right? Talk about an out-of-touch politician, not hearing the people for what they actually need. We believe that leaders, particularly in our country, they have a responsibility to voice their thoughts. But one of their primary responsibilities, particularly even in our country, is to be the voice of the people that they lead, right? We call them, right, our elected representatives. They're there to represent us, to be our voice when we have none. This is what Nehemiah has to do, right? He hears the outcry of the people in verses 1 through 5, and now he has a choice. What does he do with this problem that's been presented to him? So next set of blanks. We are to be a voice for the people that we lead. This was Nehemiah's responsibility, and we see him embrace this in the following verses. We are called to be a voice for those that we lead, right? Our employees, our spouse, our kids, our neighbors. those in the context of this church, anyone we've been given leadership authority over. We need to be their voice. Check out verse 6. I love this because this is what I would hope every leader would do when they hear about a need for a group of people that they lead. Nehemiah, right, he gets this. He hears these cries, and he records in verse 6, I was very angry when I heard their outcry and these words. He wasn't angry at the people upset and telling them about the needs. He was hurting for them. He heard this need and he internalizes it. He expresses an understanding of the issue and he aligns emotionally. He reacts the way in which we would hope any leader would react when they hear about a need of people they lead. And so what he does is he hears this need, he internalizes it, and he does something about it. He serves as the voice for these people. Verses 7 through 8. I took counsel with myself, right? He's pausing for a moment, meditating, what is the best move moving forward? I took counsel with myself, and I brought charges against the nobles and the officials, and I said to them, you are exacting interest, each from his brother. And I held a great assembly against them, and said to them, we, as far as we are able, have bought back our Jewish brothers who have been sold to the nations. But you even sell your brothers that they may be sold to us. They were silent and could not find a word to say. So Nehemiah calls out, right, these other Hebrew people who are extorting their fellow countrymen. Right? He says, you are exacting interest, a large burden upon these loans that you've given to your fellow countrymen. Verse 8, he says, you are enslaving your own people. Right? These people who just got out of slavery, they were exiled in Persian lands and other empires. They got out of slavery, and now here they are effectively back in slavery by their own people. You should be ashamed of yourself. Verse 9, so I said, the thing that you are doing is not good. Ought you not walk in the fear of our God to prevent the taunts of the nations of our enemies? Right? Are you no better than the other nations? You are no different than the rest of the world. Verse 10, moreover, I and my brothers and my servants are lending them money and grain. Let us abandon this exacting of interest. I think it's kind of interesting. In the midst of this cry, in the midst of this confrontation with these people, Nehemiah acknowledges that he too is part of this problem. He's been partaking in this practice as well, right? Loaning out grain and money and resources and exacting high interest rates of return, creating a greater burden on people in need. And he, as he's calling these people out, also acknowledges his own role in the problem. I too am part of the problem. Verse 11, return to them this very day their fields and their vineyards, their olive orchards and their houses, and the percentage of money, grain, wine, and oil that you have been exacting from them. Nehemiah says, we can do better, guys. We can do better. Verse 12 through 13, they hear this plead from Nehemiah, and they respond positively. They said, we will restore these and require nothing from them. We will do as you say. And I called the priest and made them swear to do as they had promised. I also shook out the fold of my garment and said, so may God shake out every man from his house and from his labor who does not keep this promise. So may he be shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said, amen, and praised the Lord. And the people did as they had promised. They respond positively to Nehemiah here. They promised to restore what was taken, to quit the practice of usury, and to quit taking advantage of their fellow countrymen. Nehemiah serves as an advocate here for the people that he's leading. Not only those in need, right? He's speaking up for this group of people who are going through some serious hardships. He's advocating for them. But he's also advocating for those officials and those nobles, helping to get them to a better place. They needed someone to speak the truth to them as well. Nehemiah is serving as a voice for those that he leads. We need to be prepared to act when people tell us their needs. As you consider those that you lead, as you consider maybe your spouse, right? What are they communicating to you? Are you listening? What do your kids need? Are you prepared to speak when you hear needs that they have? I think we all need to self-reflect and acknowledge too, just like Nehemiah did here in verse 10, that we contribute to the problem. We all contribute to the problem. We bring our own mess into the situation with us. And we need to be prepared to do the hard work of making things right. This is what we begin to see take place in Nehemiah. He's addressing the problems that are going on and acknowledging his own role in these problems. So if we are going to be attentive and focused leaders, our leadership, our listening has to be prioritized, and we have to be the voice of those that we lead. Now, how many of you guys have seen the movie Shrek? All right. Did you guys know there's a new one coming out? Officially discovered that yesterday at the movies. There was a trailer. Pretty excited. If you guys are familiar with it, great. If not, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, maybe spoil it, but it is an old movie, so you probably weren't watching it anyway. In the movie, you have Shrek, this ogre, right? And it's kind of this, like, fairy tale scene, but it's obviously almost like fractured fairy tales, if you remember those from back in the day. And so in the beginning scene, this is kind of the premise of the first movie. Shrek has this swamp, and all these fairy tale creatures are getting dumped in it. And he learns that there's this king in the region of far, far away who are dumping all these fairy tale creatures in a swamp. So he shows up there, and as he shows up, there's this scene where Lord Farquaad has all of these knights aligned because Lord Farquaad is looking for a princess. And he finds Princess Fiona. He hears about her locked in this tower, and she's guarded by this giant dragon, and Lord Farquaad is a brave man and decides, I'm going to send somebody else to go fetch her for me. So he has all of the knights gathered, and he's trying to kind of have this contest of sorts. Who's going to go fetch this bride for me? Shrek shows up and eventually becomes the one that goes and fetches her, as you know. But there's a statement that Lord Farquaad makes as he's telling the knights about this task that's going to be in front of them. I think of this regularly. He tells them this, right? In this journey, in this adventure you're going to make, some of you may die, and then he does this, but that is a sacrifice I am willing to make. Right? Who wants to follow a guy like that? Some of you may die, but that's a sacrifice I am willing to make. It's like you hiring a personal trainer who's out of shape. Going to a career counselor who hates their job. A therapist who's constantly stressed. Right? Listening to a pastor whose spiritual life stinks. Right? We want to follow leaders who do the things they encourage us to do. And so one thing you need to realize, and most of you know this already, but this is an important reminder for us. Great leadership is lived, it's not lectured. If you communicate to your family that a healthy spiritual life is important, then you certainly need to model it. If you tell your kids and your spouse that they are important to you and that they matter, you better show them through your actions. If you tell people that integrity is important, you better be willing to model it and do the hard things when the time comes. So the last principle I want us to see today, the qualities that we find in attentive and focused leaders, is that they lead by example. Nehemiah already mentioned he's part of this problem, part of the pain that the people are experiencing. And so in the last few verses of this chapter, we see him model sacrificial servant leadership, giving up rights that he naturally had as the governor of this Persian province. Verse 14 through 15. Moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be the governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of Artaxerxes the king, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the food allowance of the governor. The former governors who were before me laid heavy burdens on the people and took from them for their daily ration 40 shekels of silver. Even their servants lorded it over the people, but I did not do so because of the fear of God. Nehemiah, again, I'm not sure if you realize this, Nehemiah was given a political position by the king of Persia. He was the governor, not of Jerusalem, but of all Judea. He had a right to raise taxes for his own use. But he understood that that was going to be a burden on the Hebrew people that was not going to be helpful for them. And so he gave up that right. He worked alongside the people, and he did not take land from them. Check out verse 16. I persevered in the work on this wall, and we acquired no land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. Right? Nehemiah is not just sitting up in his high tower telling the people what to do as they build the wall. He is there in person, leading by example. He is busy with this project. He is leading by example, and this cost him something. Check out verses 17 through 18. Moreover, there were at my table 150 men, Jews and officials, besides those who came to us from the nations that were around us. Now what was prepared at my expense for each day was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep and birds, and every 10 days all kinds of wine in abundance. Yet for all this, I did not demand the food allowance of the governor, because the service was too heavy on this people. So Nehemiah, as a leader, it cost him something. He had to sacrifice something. Right? He is holding a political office. He's got people in his office that work for him. He's got visiting dignitaries. And rather than raising the tax on these Hebrew people to make all of these fancy meals possible, he pays for it out of his own budget. He didn't raise the money by taxing the people to do this. And he does it all, we see, ultimately for the people. Ultimately for God. Verse 19, last verse I want us to see. He ends this chapter by saying, remember for my good, oh my God, all that I have done for this people. Now remember, Nehemiah is the author of this book. I believe this last verse in this chapter is a way for him not only to remind himself, but to remind the audience of what took place there. That he did the things that were needed for him to be the kind of leader that honors God. He made sacrifices. He modeled what he was calling the people to do. He was aware that he was part of the problem as well. And he had every right just to dictate what he wanted, but he did not take advantage of that right. He led by example. So being a God-honoring leader is going to cost us something. It's going to cost you something. What is it going to cost you? When I think of leading a home, right? As I think of raising kids, it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you patience. It's sure going to cost you some sleep. Right? When you're starting a business, trying to take care of employees, trying to love them and lead them well, it's going to cost you many things, your time, your energy, maybe even your bottom line. It's going to cost you your resources. Right? Being a leader who leads well and honors God in what you do, it's going to cost you something, but that is what you are called to do, to lead by example. Now we're going to finish up. I got one more video for us. And I want you guys to watch. It's kind of very similar. This one came out, I forget, at least a decade or so after the first one. And they're going to prompt you to do the same thing. They're going to prompt you to count the passes. So I want you to watch this and pay close attention. All right, I'll stop it there. All right. How many times did they pass the ball? 16. All right. Did you guys notice anything else there? What did you see? Wow, you are good. Did anybody see anything else going on there? Did anybody notice the gorilla? There we go. We can see we're seeing the gorilla now. How many of you guys honestly counted the passes? Yeah. Some of you were like, no, I know there's something else in this video. I'm not counting passes. All right, I'm going to keep playing this, and it's going to show you a few other things here that you may have missed. All right, I'll pause there. As leaders, it's incredibly hard for us to keep our focus. Right now, you guys were counting passes and watching for a gorilla, and not everyone caught those other items as well, right? So the world is constantly changing and evolving around us, and so this is a topic that I want us to realize that we are constantly growing in, right? There's constantly areas that need our attention, and as soon as we give one area attention, we tend to lose focus on others. Keeping our focus is always going to be a challenge. If we want to be attentive and focused leaders, leading the people that we've been called to lead well, we need to listen to them, hear what they are saying, be their voice, and lead by example. And as we do that, we're less likely to miss the gorilla, right, in the room. We're less likely to miss the color of the curtain changing, the person that left the scene. Right? This is some area that we all have room for growth. Now that I've thoroughly messed with your minds this morning, I have two questions. We'll be done. Who has God entrusted you to lead? And do you lead in a manner that honors God? Let's bow our heads in a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this text and this reminder, Lord, that you have called us to lead and to lead well. Lord, help us to see the people around us that you've placed under us for us to lead and to model you. And God, as we consider, Lord, how we lead, help us to see the proverbial gorilla in the room. Because, God, we are so focused on sometimes just keeping our homes running, our businesses afloat, surviving, that we miss so much. God, may we be quick to listen. May we advocate for those that we are leading. And God, may we model our lives after you well so that they know how to follow you well. God, we struggle, all of us struggle in some component, in some area of our lives with this component. And so help us, Lord. Help us today. We love you in your amazing name. Amen.